This is Andy,
And this is Matt,
and you're listening to
the Hop Podcast with no name.
What a dumb name.
It's so stupid. Episode 83. And I just jumped right into it to surprise you, Andrea.
I'm not surprised.
Okay. We are on to systems thinking, system design, which led us to discuss what we were going to talk about today. And in doing so, you had a lot of conviction that you wanted to sort of decouple how system thinking is inside of everything else we've talked about, but still its own thing. And then you and I were going back and forth.
I don't know if it's going to help anybody. It feels helpful to me, but it's probably not going to help anybody. Well, we're going to try it anyway.
Yeah.
Because so we talk about HOP being this combination of complexity science and organizational psychology and systems thinking. And sometimes we put in restorative justice and sometimes we say resilience engineering. And it's just all of these pieces that we're trying to help make sure we can make sense out of for folks. Systems thinking is intertwined with complexity science and with resilience engineering. And it's its own thing that's important to understand. And probably the beginning phases of understanding all of what HOP is meant to be resides in systems thinking, which then helps us understand complexity, which then helps us understand resilience engineering. But if I had to try to differentiate so that we know what we're trying to talk about today, systems thinking is the recognition that there's a whole lot of bits and pieces and parts that interact with each other in order to get a specific outcome. Complexity science is the recognition that those bits and pieces interact with each other in patterns that sometimes we can't even predict what it's going to look like. They say the patterns emerge. Resilience engineering is the recognition that because we can't always predict how those patterns emerge, we have to design with failure in mind, because no matter how hard we try, failure is always going to be an option. And if that failure is catastrophic and we can't accept the outcome, then we want to try our hardest to design things recognizing points of failure or nodes of failure and design accordingly. But the beginning of all of the ability to think that way, I think, centers on the recognition of human fallibility, right? And systems thinking. And one of the quotes that I was taught early on, I think from Mushara, but I guess originally it came from Deming, is our systems are perfectly tuned to get the outcome they're getting, or something like that. Matt, do you have the actual quote? Because I make it up every time, but
every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets.
Yeah, every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. Which, once I could embed that thought process in my mind, the way that I looked at solving problems, or at least the number of options of things that I could tweak or change to get a different outcome, felt like astronomically greater than before.
But can we pause for a second? Because
always.
Yeah.
Back us up.
Take a breath. The thought from Deming, and you mentioned Mushara, is, to me, seemingly so obvious, right? Like, if you think about it very linearly, when we're talking about our system of, we're trying to get product out the door. Our system is built to get that much product out the door. And then an incident happens, and a lot of our minds falls outside the system. It's an unacceptable maybe behavior or decision or whatever it ends up being that we view as the cause of this incident, but it's never historically in the conversation we've had, it's never connected to me directly as, that's just part of what we've built. These incidents and the way they happen, the way they come together, are just part of the system that we built.
Yeah. Meaning that I think when we have an outcome that we didn't expect, which I think Todd at one point tried to coin a phrase, deviation from expected outcome, which I don't know that it caught on, but I'm going to use it because it's good. So we have a deviation from an expected outcome. Oftentimes, the way that we picture the outcome, we picture the person or the people, the end user, as being separate from the rest of the ingredients. And we sort of bifurcate our thought process of there's process, right? That's the not human part. And then there's person, and 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 we bifurcate it so that it doesn't feel as though all of those pieces are working together to create the outcome that we see. And like good examples of that in my mind, I've used this example before, but when I had 40% of people or 60% of people not wearing safety glasses, I was like, there's got to be other stuff happening that's outside of the person in order for this to make sense. Like there's got to be more pieces of this puzzle, because I can't wrap my head around 60% of people just not caring, right? There's something else going on. Or, example that we could use, Matt, of like, we have projects that have missed deadlines, right? So consistently a project misses a deadline. You can view the problem as we don't have good project management. You can also just view the problem as we don't have good process to manage our product. Or you could view the problem as a bunch of other ingredients intermixed in all of that, right? A larger systems view, which, Matt, this was a pretty common in your world, like the other ingredients apart from, hey, we have a project process and we have people that execute the project. What's the rest of the system pieces that you can recall from your world?
Yeah, I mean, we used to have a weekly call that was about our projected revenue numbers for the month or the quarter or the year. And what was the feedback was constantly given that, well, we just need to be better at projecting our forecast. We need, Matt, your team, the other teams need to be better at owning the forecast number and really, really taking like accountability for it. And I would think to myself, okay, yeah, this is on me. And then in thinking more about what actually the system I was operating in, we were always, myself included, we would reward optimistic scheduling or optimistic forecasting. And we would,
like the higher the number, the better. Like, we're going to hit this in Q3. And people were just like, man, Matt, you're so good at your job.
Yep. And then if it was a number that was more realistic, it was, what do you mean that's the number? That can't
What
be
are
the
you going to
number.
do to make it? That's not possible.
That
You're not
can't be
allowed
it.
to have that number.
You need to, that number needs to be higher. You need to go find more for that number. And then we would have an outcome that was closer to the realistic number, and everyone would freak out and say, like, how could this be true? Well, I and my teams were rewarded for inflating that forecast number because it's the only way that it was actually accepted, even though it wasn't a proper reflection of reality. And when reality hit, well, you're bad at forecasting again, because you forecasted a higher number because we made you. We made you do it. And then you didn't hit that number, and now you're bad.
So in your case, it wouldn't necessarily be project deadline, but it would be a metric output of a revenue number, for example,
Correct.
right? So consistently people would miss their revenue targets. And what we said at the beginning, you could picture that as the people who are in charge of the process to hit those revenue targets. You can picture them as a problem, or you can picture the process itself as the forecasting process itself as the problem, or you picture it as a combination of a bunch of things, including the rest of these system level influences, which I think you just described as culturally, we were recognized and rewarded. Even beyond that, it was only certain numbers were acceptable to even say out loud. So if it's only acceptable for me to over predict my revenue, then we should not be surprised when we over predict and underperform consistently.
But, and also, we're not able to have honest conversation about where we're at, what current state is actually like.
And when you combine those things together, then it almost feels like an inevitable outcome, which I think is the point of what Deming was trying to get to us, is like we are perfectly tuned. If you look at the cultural ingredients, if you look at the physical constraints, if you look at the process ingredients and the people ingredients, when you add them all together, and you then like imagine speeding up time and looking at the outcome over and over and over and over and over again, it's actually whatever our outcome is made up of not just one of those pieces, but the combination of a bunch of different ingredients that exist, which is why we say all the time that the ingredients for tomorrow's really bad day exist in how things are running today, right? And that's that system view of, hey, there's a whole bunch of pieces of this puzzle and we don't want to get hyper fixated on any one of them. We want to be open to learning about multiple in order to be able to better tune ourselves to the outcome we're looking for. That's sort of the basis of a desire to learn about reality, including having conversation about the cultural pieces, which you just talked to, in this example of revenue missing a metric requirement.
Yeah, I want to give another example that's maybe more in the world that we live in now.
Like Earth?
Yeah, the world we live in now, this current state, or our current state. Because in thinking about this, one reoccurring message that we've heard, I think, in the past 12 months, we've spent some time with companies in the utility space.
Mm-hmm.
And seemingly every company has told us that they have, I'll throw out a number, 300 meter readers that go to homes and read the meter at each individual home, and they travel across the city, and that's their full-time job. And they drive trucks. And when these companies think about their system, they allocate, okay, we have X number of meter readers, and they're going to get through the total city once a month, and that's how we're going to accomplish our goal of knowing what the meter says. But an unacceptable part of that is when they inevitably back into or hit something, even though we've given them large trucks to navigate tiny city streets. So the system is built to have them with their tools navigate these streets to get the meters read once a month, every house. And how often have you and I sat there and then we've been told, yeah, but we keep hitting stuff with these trucks. It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And all I can think in this moment, in this line that we're talking about is, well, why are you surprised? The system you've built puts large trucks into small city streets, and they drive thousands of miles a month. You should anticipate X number of accidents just as part of your system.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And I think that that's why I love driving examples so often, is because it's almost like in my mind, I can picture, picture like, what do they call it when you set up a camera and you just time elapse? That's what I'm looking for. Picture like time elapse of like a view, which is, it's a very visual when we're thinking about driving, right? And you can just picture the time elapse of like, well, yeah, if you just do this over and over again, if you take big trucks and put them in tiny spaces with blind spots and people and dogs and like all of the other thing, the real stuff that happens on streets and around and other cars, and you take it and you just sat there with time elapse. Yeah. Yep. That's what's going to happen. And there's really no amount of pounding the desk to say we want it to be different. It is perfectly tuned to get that outcome. So we're going to have to change something.
But I love the changes are always like we put cameras to face the drivers to make sure they're paying attention when they're parking.
Right. So like in a systems view, that'd be like taking a tiny piece of this huge puzzle and like amplifying the piece and putting all your, eggs in one basket of this puzzle. I want to be clear. It's not that humans are not part of the puzzle. We are. It's just, we're just one tiny little piece of a very large puzzle. And because we're flexible and adaptable, we tend to be the piece that people try to mold the fastest and the most. Like if we could just get all the people to do this, then things would be better. But we're not this like tiny moldable piece the way that we picture it in this system design. Like we're not a thing. Humans are not a thing you can just like turn and say, now you all do this. That's just not how we work. And so oftentimes we're putting so many eggs in the human adaptability, push them to be different basket, that we're not even looking at the other reasons why things are happening. Like we ignore all the rest of the pieces because they feel harder to fix, right?
And get
But
them backup cameras. Just just get them backup cameras. Why? This is.
well, Matt, they have backup cameras and sometimes they still hit things, so it didn't fix the problem 100%.
But sometimes
Right? Like
they don't.
That's the argument that we make. Like, it didn't fix it. We don't have an easy button. And you're like, yeah, there is no easy button. You're correct. There is no perfect solution. There is no easy button. Every time you change your system, it's going to be tuned to get a different outcome. And we're looking to see whether that outcome is better or worse than what we did before. But there is no perfect system design because of, now move from systems thinking to complexity, right? Because of these various puzzle pieces we're just talking about, they're fluctuating and they're varying. So as soon as we think we've pinned something down, it starts to move. And then we're like, crap, our new current state, the set point is a little bit better, but it's not perfect. It's still going to have variation in it. Yes, that is the crux of life, of this variation, this fluctuation that happens. That is so true. And then that's when you go from, okay, so we have this fluctuation variation. Let's now do our very best to design, recognizing we're going to hit something. Now what? Can we make it so that when we hit something, or we lose situational awareness for a moment and we're about to hit something, can we design in a way that somebody doesn't die? And that gets into the resilience engineering part. So it's this whole sort of cycle of thought, but none of it's perfect. And I think that that's the part that is most frustrating to people. Is it feels as though, for example, Matt, if we invest in backup cameras, we should never hit something again. Like, shouldn't we be rewarded for that? Right? Like, we didn't blame the person. We invested in the proper camera for it. It cost the company money. There's this feeling of, even when we try to do this quote unquote right, meaning even when we try to look at the rest of what's happening and we try to adjust some of these other puzzle pieces, and we try to not just pin things on one specific puzzle piece, that people become frustrated when that's not a perfect solution.
I'm not backing down from my point.
I'm not asking you to.
I just want to be clear that the point that I was making is, if we have to decide whether to get cameras that face internally
or
at the
face
driver,
rear, sure.
or help them
absolutely.
park, I think we should
Correct.
spend the money to help them park.
If you're trade-offs, no, we're on the same page.
But the point you made is well taken, which is, I totally agree that when we introduce this, we can get into a whole lot of layers of this. When quote unquote we introduce, and usually it's leadership chooses to introduce backup cameras into the fleet, it is under the assumption that we should no longer back into anything.
Correct. Yeah.
That is,
and then that becomes a really big point of frustration when that's not true. And even if we've reduced hitting things by a large percentage, it feels as though that level of investment should make it so you never hit anything again. And
it's interesting because we have a lot of evidence, the world, where when we have backup cameras, we still back up into things.
I know. And I think that is the hardest part about where we are in, whether we're talking about, operational excellence or in a safety journey, is a lot of the low hanging fruit we've worked through, right? Yeah. We've created some requirements around energy isolation, right? We have done a good job in the world in making work much safer and run much smoother than it ever has before. And now we're into this minutia of, we got to do something. If you want to get better, there's another step change. And that step change is not easy because it is way harder to conceptualize. And we don't know how to manage a lot of the pieces. Meaning, for example, going back to your scheduling,
forecasting,
or your revenue prediction, mm-hmm. But let's say we even sat down and we brought folks like yourself together and we did operational learning, and we learned incredibly quickly that, hey, part of what's happening here as to why we keep missing our revenue numbers is that the revenue numbers today, when they are not achievable from our perspective, we can't tell you that they're not achievable. That's not even part of what is socially acceptable. Let's say we even were able to articulate that to each other, which is a whole step in terms of psychological safety, the ability to have these conversations, all the organizational psychology stuff that we've already talked about. Now we have to change that.
Change.
Right? Like
what's
that social norm.
Okay.
So if we want better open reporting in terms of what we truly believe the forecast is going to be, and we have found a piece of this puzzle that we need to adjust, we now actually have to adjust that piece of the puzzle, meaning leadership teams have to be able to articulate the fact that they are rewarding and act in accordance with rewarding accuracy. That requires oftentimes metric change, right? Like I'm going to reward the closeness, not the revenue number you hit, but the closeness of your forecast to the actual revenue number. And in order to do that, a person individually has to be okay with hearing the reality of something, as opposed to, and then they, whoever they're talking to, they have to be able to articulate that reality to a board or to investors. And so there's each part of this system is interconnected with other systems, and it's hard to change any of it.
It's funny hearing you say this because
yeah,
it's clear you never worked in my world. that would be ridiculous. That's a crazy idea.
Say more, because nobody would ever change it. Or what do you mean?
I mean, I'm being partially facetious, but also, I mean, the world that I live in, it's lived in. It's not nearly as neat in terms of projections to begin with, and there's a lot of dynamic change, and there's not an established history of X, Y, or Z being the outcome. And so when you're a smaller company going through mergers, acquisitions, new product launches, product sunsets, it's really hard to have that conversation for a couple of reasons. One, because you just don't have the data really to know how to forecast. And two, it is incredibly likely the reason this happened is some large company invested a lot of money and they expect results. And to try to tell someone on a C-suite or board level, hey, that is not going to work, at least in the way that it currently exists, is essentially the fastest way to get yourself removed from a role that I've ever seen. So it's just a different world. But I agree. I mean, part of the question that was asked me when I joined Hop from where I came from is what I would bring into my previous life. And it's all this stuff. There's a lack of honest discussion and psychological safety to have these types of talks where I came from.
Yeah. So do you fundamentally agree or disagree with the fact that even if we identified that cultural piece, I mean, I think we're saying the same thing, that it feels almost impossible to change? I mean, like, even if we identified the cultural piece of like, hey, we are rewarded for inflating our forecast, that changing that becomes the difficulty because of all the rest of the influences you just listed off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, it would be almost, especially, I mean, maybe at the level I was at, because I reported to the CEO, I might be able to, if I could really get a deep understanding of what was happening, articulate in a way that she would have heard me and be at least able to try to make some changes. But that's incredibly rare and extremely difficult, even if we establish that, hey, we're incentivizing probably the wrong behaviors when it comes to forecasting.
Yeah. And I think this is when in the actual execution of trying to learn about systems influences, which operational learning is designed to help with that. I think this is where a lot of people feel really stuck, because not all the things that you learn about that are part of the influencing aspects of your system that are getting you the perfectly tuned results, not all of them are changeable, at least not in the current state. And so being able to focus on the things you do have control over is incredibly powerful and important. But when you know the rest of the pieces and they're in your sphere of concern, like you're aware of them, and like in a perfect utopian world, you could push on it and you could change it, it becomes really hard to focus on what you can actually change, which is why post operational learning. So picture you're learning about the system, right? Like that's the intent. You're learning about the process. You're learning about the good and the bad and the ugly of what it takes to get work done. You can talk to that as like, hey, we're learning about the conditions of things, right? We're learning about the ingredients of things, whatever terminology makes sense. We're learning about the problems associated with it, the good stuff that works well. When you can finally articulate those various pieces, being able to map them on a sphere of concern, influence, or control is incredibly helpful, because then at least you can look it in the face and say, okay, I mean, ideally, I'd love if our board felt differently about this, but guess what? That is intertwined with the global view of money. So probably not something that I'm going to be able to adjust. Let's see what other pieces of this puzzle we could adjust in order to get us closer to the output that we want, knowing we can't change all of them.
That's a whole lot of stuff.
I don't know if it's good, a lot of stuff, but it is a whole lot of it.
But let's, I mean, we kind of anchored it.
Can you hear the background of like perhaps somebody's digging under the foundation of my house at this moment in time?
I was worried there's like a sinkhole forming.
It's kind of what it feels like
Yeah,
at this moment in time.
that's good.
I am not exactly sure what's happening outside, but when we're done, I'll go check it out.
Yeah, if your microphone goes silent, I will announce to the audience what I'm seeing on screen. I mean, we started this conversation, you and I, and carried over into the start of the podcast with the quote of, your systems are attuned to get the results you're getting. And you said, and I quote, and now I'm putting you in the spot, let's make some homework.
Yeah. And I think the homework is this: next time that anyone is able to do some operational learning, take the time to take the things that you've found, the ingredients, the elements of this system that you've learned about, and map them out in terms of, are these changeable, or are they in a sphere of concern? Are they in a sphere of influence? Are they in a sphere of control? Which is a bit hard to do, because oftentimes we can solution towards something, and the solution itself might fall into a sphere of concern, control, or influence. And the problem, you can't quite, the problem might feel bigger than you, but you might be able to adjust part of it. But take a moment to map out what you think it would be, so that if you don't do this already, you can focus your attention on the bits and pieces of the puzzle that are changeable, with the caveat that that can't just be the end user's behavior. Like there's got to be something else that we can also, another piece of the puzzle that we think we can do something differently about. But just focusing on an end user's behavior dictated by somebody else, right? Like, hey, I'm dictating that you, end user, do X, Y, and Z. That's what I mean by end user's behavior. Just see whether or not mapping that out of concern, influence, and control, if it's helpful in directing where you put your resourcing and your time.
So that's for those who maybe have the chance to do operational learning. For those who don't, I'm going to suggest that you look at whether it's your KPI reporting or just what comes up in conversation or is sent to your desk, what is talked about as if it is an outlier of your system, as if it's something that is not actually driven by what you've created or assigned as work. And the example goes back to the utility trucks. What are we talking about as like backing up into something when you're parking as an unacceptable outlier in our system? And what are we talking about like day in, day out that feels like we don't have control over?
When you say outlier, do you mean outlier of outcome?
Outlier
like
of outcome. Yeah.
This is the unacceptable.
Yeah. Like this
outcome.
our system should not be producing this. This is an outlier.
Yeah. Okay. So once I identify that, do I do anything with it, or I just
no?
identify?
I think it's just helpful to have that. I'm not giving anyone extra homework. That's crazy. I just want someone who wasn't operational learning to have something to go and look for. Look for these things are outliers, and you're trying to make them do some.
I'm sorry. I'm just wondering.
No.
Okay. Fair enough.
All
So they
right.
have 2 homework options.
2 homework options. Extra credit if you do both. All right. Thanks for listening.
Well, that's it.
Yep, another one in the books. We did it.
If you want to send us any of your thoughts, actually fling us any of your thoughts, you can do so at the website www.hoppodcast.com.
That's HOPPODCAST.com.
It's still such a stupid name.
It's such a different name. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.